John Cena is without a doubt one of the greatest superstars in WWE history, the face of a generation, and for many the reason they connected with the product in the first place. However, throughout his time at the top, there was a period where he was simply known as Super Cena. Between 2005 to 2014, the character was akin to a comic book hero come to life. He had Herculean feats of strength, a mantra of never giving up, and a recognizable bright and vibrant presentation, very similar to superheroes you'd see in movies. And for some fans, his act got very stale very quick. The feeling for that group was that WWE beat them into submission by only pushing one man. The explanation for him being disliked by that portion of the audience was his booking, the formula of his matches, and how the John Cena character essentially had no flaws. He would have superhero-like powers which would allow him to take a beating for the majority of the match, hulk up, do his 5 moves of doom, and end up winning the match to the point where it wasn't even a question as to how the match's structure would shape out. Now, that did change in the later years with him putting over his fair share of talent and going on a redemption tour with his US Open Challenge, but I wanted to look at everything beforehand, all the instances that we remember to this day, the years where Super Cena was at his peak powers. Everyone's got opinions on John Cena, good, bad, or neutral. On this channel, it's pretty obvious that John Cena is my favorite wrestler of all time, and he's the guy who kept me hooked. But looking at this from an objective standpoint, there's going to be some rough periods that Cena fans don't like, because I'm going to tell it to you like I see it now. This isn't to discredit his legacy. He's done so much, and I've already talked about just how much good he's done and the global icon he's becoming a name bigger than WWE itself. This is looking at the storylines and opponents he faced off with during his time at the top. With this video, there's a difference between trashing on someone and then identifying what went wrong, and most of these are a case of circumstance and what this guy wanted, but there are a few in here which you can refer to as proper burials, and that term is way overused. A guy will lose one match, he's buried, he's done. Losing one match doesn't mean that. A burial is when someone repetitively stunts the momentum of an act to the point where they're beyond repair and they've lost standing in the eyes of the viewer. It's a downward spiral. The act is obvious, not unintentional. That's a burial. That's when you basically finish someone off for good to the point of no return. If someone who's established takes a loss, that's not a burial. And oftentimes, what happens with these big stars is the symptom gets blamed more than the cause. But enough wrestling dictionary for today. To understand Super Cena, we have to go back to 2004. This is where John Cena really started to hit his stride in the WWE. His rise on SmackDown as a rapper won over the audience with his brash confidence, hilarious raps, and eccentric way of dressing. What started out as a heel character and something that was never supposed to become this big, by 2005 became a WWE Championship for him at WrestleMania 21. Just a few days later is where some older fans started to turn on him, because this is where he introduced the Spinner WWE Championship. And the Spinner Championship for many is an anomaly. There were people in the wrestling business who strongly believed a world title should not look like a toy. It should have prestige, and the fact that this spun ruffled a lot of feathers with traditional fans, and rightfully so. They believed that the lineage and prestige of the company's top prize was being made a mockery of. Now, I love the Spinner Championship. To this day, it's probably my favorite championship. It represented the era that I grew up with, but did this overstay its welcome? If I'm being critical, yeah, it did. Probably should have been specific to Cena only. Regardless, he was given the keys to the kingdom so very quickly, and they already changed the design to cater to him. Cena still had a groundswell of support until he was moved to Raw in June of 2005, where he was the #1 overall pick, bringing the WWE title to Raw while Batista went to SmackDown. Batista was very much settling into that #1 guy role on Raw, and then WWE just threw a change-up, rushing Cena over and also assuming that it would work. When Cena made the move over, he got away from the rapper gimmick and started to talk with his normal voice, delivering more basic and sometimes bland promos without the creativity that we were oh so used to. This was by his own accord though. He started to see the audience change, and the audience did change. The earliest instances of the crowd turning on Cena came against Chris Jericho at SummerSlam 2005, jeering him instead of the normal reactions he got. What didn't help was his earliest rivalries were against fan favorites that many believe should be in Cena's position. After Jericho, he ran into the wrestling machine that was Kurt Angle, and his in-ring deficiencies were exposed. Let's not sugarcoat it, he was never the level of an Angle, certainly not at this stage. And this is where the narrative of him not being able to wrestle started to grow even more. They even tried to turn Angle against the fans, but it didn't work. They had Eric Bischoff do the whole boss hates the champion act against John Cena, but that didn't work either. It can also be said that when those boos started to come out, it wasn't anything new. It was just those fans who already didn't like Cena having their voice heard more, if that makes any sense. They made Angle into an anti-America heel to get people behind Cena, and coming into 2006, he had held the title for 9 months, and at New Year's Revolution, he was cashed in on by Edge, and John Cena just a few weeks later won back the title, and Edge didn't get too long to solidify himself either. His reign ended up being just 20 days, and naturally the hatred is gonna go to the guy who won it off him, with some fans seeing this as the real beginning of the infatuation with John Cena for the company. This was because he was going to face Triple H at WrestleMania 22. It's been reported that WWE was tempted to continue the Edge reign and do a triple threat, but that never happened. At WrestleMania, it was John Cena versus Triple H, with the company playing this up as old school versus new school. And they played that up because Cena was getting booed, and the fans were instead cheering Triple H, who was supposed to be the bad guy. Fans wanted more in his stories, more intrigue, but at WrestleMania 22, he made Triple H tap, and the reaction after this picked up considerably, and it got progressively worse. At the Hall of Fame the night before, the fans viciously booed Cena, and what else had been established at this time was the 5 moves of doom. Flying shoulder tackle, sit out hip toss, the side slam, 5-knuckle shuffle, and the FU. Can I also just say real quick that everybody talks about limited moveset? Okay, Hogan, Austin, Rock, and Cena. Those are the company's 4 biggest money draws of all time. They all had limited movesets, let's not kid ourselves. And with those limited movesets, toured the world and made millions. Continuing on with the timeline, the same year we also saw ECW One Night Stand, where John Cena walked into the Hammerstein Ballroom and got murdered with the most hostile reaction I've ever seen. The crowd throwing their shirt back at him, chucking toilet paper at him. They chanted "F you Cena, Cena swallows, overrated, die Cena die." Like, this night was something else. That was, of course, to be expected because that's just how ECW fans are. They're hardcores, and Cena represented everything that wasn't to their liking. He lost the title to RVD, but not clean because of Edge's interference. WWE didn't like having Cena lose clean at all. Even Edge's cash-in at New Year's Revolution, Cena kicked out of the first spear. By September, Cena won back the WWE title from Edge in Edge's hometown of Toronto. A poor reception for Cena, but this makes sense. It was in Edge's hometown. What do you expect? 2006 was also the year where Umaga arrived on the scene in WWE. And look at this guy. He's a complete freak of nature. WWE's next big monster. He was running through everyone. And then he ran into John Cena. He was on an undefeated streak up until this point, beating Triple H, HBK, and Kane, not pinned or submitted. Well, John Cena beat him at New Year's Revolution. It was mainly all Umaga, and this ended up with a roll-up for the WWE Champion. The match's result was very unconvincing, and following that up was a rematch that came at the Rumble, this time in a last man standing match. The match was great. Umaga's mystique was already hampered, and he lost again, and he was never really the same after this. In retrospect, I don't think WWE should have put Umaga in that position. Going to SmackDown would have been the better option because Raw was already so top heavy with Cena, Randy, Michaels, Edge, Triple H. They had him bypass the IC title scene and immediately go for the WWE title. The Intercontinental Championship win that came after this feud should have came first. But like I said, Umaga was never really the same after this. This one comes down to booking. Why put the hottest monster you have in a position to immediately lose? Also, with Mania coming up, Triple H and John Cena were set to have a rematch. That didn't happen as Shawn Michaels took his spot and Cena beat him. This was part of his eventual 380-day reign, and no one was getting through him. I really actually liked this reign. I thought that this established Cena as big time. This was Cena's big championship run, and I think it's aged very well, taking on the likes of Shawn Michaels, Umaga, multi-man matches, and Randy Orton. He got injured, and when he returned, he set his sights back on Randy Orton before getting injured again in the summer and then returning at Survivor Series to win the World Heavyweight Championship off Chris Jericho, who was the MVP of WWE in 2008. The product was now a lot different, and this is where Cena became, in my opinion, the most insufferable, copy-paste, and flat-out boring he's ever been. You already had the repeat matches with Orton, and now he was no longer that guy, but the company continued to push him despite a portion of the audience getting tired. They even addressed it as polarizing and that the traditional fans didn't like him. That brought us to 2010, and buckle up for this one. When you think of Super Cena, for me anyways, the Nexus logo is immediately the first thing that comes to my head. The most notorious storyline in John Cena's career, aside from getting stabbed. The Nexus was a group of rookies new to the roster, and they put the entirety of WWE on notice. After all, this was the scene after their first night on the main roster, legitimately one of the most crazy visuals in the company's history. They wanted the group's initial emergence to be loud and clear, and this was as crystal clear as you could get. The group would go through attacking anyone at any time, and they only had an allegiance to themselves. Well, fast forward a little bit, they cost John Cena the WWE Championship at Money in the Bank, and since there were 7 of them, Cena assembled Team WWE to take them on at SummerSlam in an elimination match. In this match was also Edge, Chris Jericho, Daniel Bryan, even Bret Hart joined. So the stamp on the group's arrival would have been to beat the established stars, especially after the summer of Nexus. Like, these guys were legit taking over the show, and I thought it was very well done. Anyways, at the end of this match, it was 2-on-1. Cena left on his own against the group's leader and winner of NXT Season 1, Wade Barrett, and Justin Gabriel. Barrett hit Cena with a DDT on the exposed concrete, only for him to recover 2 minutes later, eliminate Gabriel, and then tap out Barrett. Genuinely, one of the most mind-boggling decisions ever. You had this hot act with the potential to make multiple stars if done right, but no, they didn't pull the trigger. Essentially, you had June, July, and a part of August wasted only for Cena to beat a 2-on-1 disadvantage, Hulk up, and win. After this, what happened was they ran a storyline where Cena had to join the Nexus. They bullied him around for a bit, but the credibility the group had was lost at this point. WWE badly went into regroup mode, and they tried to rehash the momentum, but it was too late. The storyline also featured a freed or fired match, Wade Barrett taking on Randy Orton. If Barrett won, Cena was freed from the Nexus. If he lost, Cena was fired from the WWE. Well, as we know, Wade Barrett never became a WWE champion. John Cena ended up getting storyline fired from WWE, only for him to continuously appear and one by one take out the Nexus, making them look even more foolish. The nail in the coffin was when Cena beat Barrett at TLC 2010 and then proceeded to bury him with chairs after the match. Such a messy way for things to fizzle out for this group. By the way, if you watch this back, essentially what led to the TLC match was John Cena dominating the entire group on a weekly basis, and the group, who months ago was destroying everyone, basically went, yeah, he's hurting us too much, Wade. If you don't wrestle him, we're gonna leave you behind. And yeah, they tried to fix things up with the core and the new Nexus, but it was a lost cause. Cena single-handedly ruined their momentum, and yes, this does come down to what was scripted by Vince and company, but man, this was a mess of epic proportions. This was a proper burial of the group, because you had this hot act in the Nexus with Wade Barrett at the forefront of it. You built them up like forces unlike any other, only for Super Cena's powers to kick in. Oh, you want another nail in the coffin? How about at the Royal Rumble the following year, eliminating the new Nexus just to add one final touch? And the immediate discussion after this is, well, oh, blame Vince. Wade Barrett in an interview said that one of the agents told them that they were going over a week beforehand. Even when they got to the arena, Jericho and Edge were like, hey, we're going to try to make you guys look like stars tonight, only to later be told that they were going to lose and Cena would end up winning. They went to Vince. Vince's reply was SummerSlam needed a happy ending. Even they knew that this was the wrong decision. Chris Jericho and Edge talked about this on Jericho's podcast, saying that Cena wanted to do things a certain way and they told him that he was wrong. He did it anyways and it sucked. Afterwards, he came to both of them and he said that he should have listened, Edge adding that the Nexus should have gone over. Cena himself has admitted to being wrong on the finish.
I guessed wrong on the way that the story was told, and I think that's why people are so up in arms about it. But we tell so many stories. I was wrong once, and I'm very open enough to admit that I was wrong.
Like I said at the top, point of no return. He ended that group. This was really bad. But there was also humor which didn't land at this time either, and gets an immediate eye roll from some fans because you guys know immediately what I'm talking about. Like if somebody said bologna, fudge, and mustard, or my life is being ruined by the internet, or the chick from Wendy's, you'd be crucified today. Cena's an amazing promo, and when you let the guy go, he can tear a hole through someone 2 times over, but this was just his most unsufferable time frame ever, where Cena wins LOL was at its most true form. The next instance we gotta look at is WrestleMania 27, where the beef between The Rock and John Cena essentially didn't help Miz get much of the spotlight. He was a WWE champion headed into the event and felt like a complete afterthought even though he won, thanks to The Rock of course. Even at Over the Limit when John Cena had a lead pipe and Alex Riley, it wasn't enough for The Miz. Cena had already won back the WWE title by that point, and then he took on R-Truth, who had a brief push. Now, there was no way that R-Truth was winning that championship, so let's not act like this was anything out of the ordinary. Just a transitional feud, really. That year also saw the now fabled Summer of Punk, where CM Punk ascended into the stratosphere of the WWE. He caught fire when the company used a real situation in Punk's contract expiring to their advantage in storyline. Money in the Bank 2011 was held in Punk's hometown of Chicago, where Cena came out to a chorus of boos. Well, long story short, he ended up dropping the WWE Championship to Punk, which was the right decision. The stip was that if Cena lost, he'd be fired. Well, 1 year previous he'd been fired. Now let's see what happens. In storyline, the WWE Championship was also gone, so Vince announced an 8-man tournament to crown a new WWE Champion since Punk didn't work there anymore. Later in the same night, McMahon came out to fire Cena before Triple H said that he wasn't going to do that, and Cena would keep his job. Well, the next week, Rey Mysterio won the WWE title tournament and then lost the championship to Cena on the same night. The disrespect to Rey Mysterio shown here. The guy lost the championship to someone who wasn't even supposed to be in the company. Disrespectful moment, yes, Rey deserved a longer championship reign, but it's Rey Mysterio, it didn't hamper him. It's more so us fans being like, oh, how could they? And honestly, they should have just let the guy at least escape Raw with the title. Rey was already established. This wasn't really that bad. But the next instance actually was. I talked about Punk, let's talk about another guy who's not in the company, and that's Alex Riley. For those unfamiliar, Alex Riley was a guy who had been with the WWE since 2007 and showed a great deal of potential. He had the look, he was respectable in the ring, with people thinking that he would be poised to break out and do something big with the company. Vince was clearly a fan, but John Cena, not so much. As the story goes, Cena was joking around and made a joke about Riley in front of some wrestlers. He didn't react very well, and it was seen as him being ignorant and not really a dude who should be in the locker room. Because in backstage culture, ribs are just a part of the territory. He reacted poorly to the apparent joke. Riley was seen as one of the faces of the future. He turned face and feuded with The Miz. Later, it looked like he might win the US Championship off Dolph Ziggler, but that never happened. After that, he basically disappeared from WWE programming and his fall was very quick. It should also be noted that Riley also suffered a hip injury in October of 2011. Also, he had his fair share of mistakes on screen, including when he messed up at the Royal Rumble. At the crux of things, reading and listening to his interviews and others commenting on the matter, what it was a difference in belief. John Cena thought that he should have to pay his dues. Stories also emerged that Cena yelled at him for using supplements. Riley has confirmed that there was a backstage incident between Cena and himself. There was even a tag match where he was micromanaged by Cena. Riley saying, quote, "We just really didn't like each other." Cena, obviously having the backstage pull, went to higher ups and was like, yo, this isn't a guy that you can rely on, because they just didn't get along. Let's keep going with 2011 though. That was when Zack Ryder started Z True Long Island Story, a YouTube series which would show how charismatic and likable he truly was.
Roses are red and violets are blue. You may have left me, but I still woo.
What, bro?
What are you doing?
Trying to get over.
Zack started to be a guy that the fans wanted to see more on TV, with the crowds chanting, "We want Ryder." Before social media took off, he used it to his advantage and he got put back on WWE programming. His quest for the US Championship began, but he couldn't win it. By December, John Cena got more involved with Zack Ryder, and they had a match where if Ryder won, he would get a US Championship match, but if Cena won, he'd be inserted into the WWE Championship match at TLC. Well, Cena ended up winning the match, pinning Ryder, and then for no reason went backstage to forfeit his spot and give it to Ryder, eventually helping him beat Mark Henry to get a US title shot. Ryder won the US title. Look at this photograph. Eventually, he lost the title to Jack Swagger a few weeks later, and he had Eve as his love interest. Zack just continued to get beat up on a weekly basis by Kane. He was in a wheelchair, he was getting embarrassed in front of his girl, and they just continued to do this over and over and over. It was almost like they had a vendetta to make Zack Ryder look like a chump, all the while Cena and Kane were feuding. This was just filler for Cena to get to WrestleMania and face off against The Rock. Come Valentine's Day in storyline, Ryder was gonna profess his love for Eve, and Cena's like, yo man, don't worry, I'll bring her to you because every time you go out, Kane just ends up kicking your ass. Well, later in the night, Kane was driving away in an ambulance and Cena was trying to save whoever was in the back, and that ended up being Eve. She jumps out and Cena kisses her and Ryder just shows up like, bro, what? Later in the night, gets pushed off the stage in a wheelchair, and yeah, that's about it for Zack Ryder. Confusing, awful, just really bad. And literally, you guys know why this happened. It's because he got over and WWE didn't want him to. Did Cena directly contribute to this? Yes and no. By virtue of being the guy in storyline to steal Ryder's girl, it made Ryder look like a fool, and then having his opponent beat Ryder to the point of no return didn't help him either. A homegrown success that was brought down because WWE just didn't want him to get to that next level. That's really what it was. This didn't come down to Cena beating anyone, but WWE using Cena as the guy to end another man's momentum. Let's be honest, Cena had no right to be in this storyline.
For your information, I'm disease-free. I'd like to keep it that way.
But yeah, this was very confusing, and for Zack, this was the beginning of the end. It really seems like when something's organic and not Vince's own creation, he gets petty like this. If we want to talk about Vince's creations though, let's talk about Brock Lesnar. We had Cena versus Lesnar at Extreme Rules 2012. 2012 was the year of the most hype match that I've ever witnessed in my life, and that was Cena Rock 1. Well, after Cena lost, WWE wanted to start telling the story of his tailspin, how this was the worst year of his professional and personal life before he eventually won. Enter Brock Lesnar. He returned the night after WrestleMania 28 after 8 years away, dominance in the UFC, and he had such an aura around him. Logic would suggest that the legit fighter comes in and beats the company's top guy into a pulp, especially with the narrative that they were trying to create. But that didn't end up happening. Cena won after a really good match. I guess they did rebuild Brock, but this is another booking decision that would have benefited the other man. I wouldn't put it past Vince for doing it in spite either, since Brock left him high and dry in 04. Also, a haha to the UFC. I don't know how this man thinks, but if I'm trying to get in his shoes, I wouldn't put it past him. I talked about Cena's character earlier and how it had no flaws. A loss here would have helped that character arc, just hitting rock bottom after losing to a rock bottom. It didn't make sense in the grand scheme of things. The story arc would have advanced further if he would have continued to lose his big matches. He got his big win at WrestleMania 29, winning the WWE Championship. This was also a time in which WWE was failing at creating their next big stars. The World Heavyweight Championship scene to add to that was also a mess. On the other end, Daniel Bryan was starting his organic rise in the WWE. Cena dropped the WWE Championship to Bryan at SummerSlam because he had to have tricep surgery. Went away for a couple months before winning the World Heavyweight Championship from Alberto Del Rio at Hell in a Cell. The next night, he met Damien Sandow. For those who don't know, Damien Sandow made his debut in 2012, and his character was the intellectual savior of the unwashed masses, wearing a bathrobe to the ring, those completely pink tights, and he had the chorus of Hallelujah as his entrance. The guy had the gift of gab and looked real promising. He was alright in the ring, but he had the charisma to back it up. Well, he won the Money in the Bank in 2013. Sandow, during his time as Mr. Money in the Bank, was booked to the point of no return. Lost match after match. They did that thing where, oh, he's just one win away so he could lose a lot. Guy was literally changing his finisher every other week. But the final nail in the coffin was John Cena. The night after Hell in a Cell, John Cena told us that his arm wasn't anywhere near 100%. Out came Sandow. We had a pre-match beatdown on John Cena's injured arm. About 9 briefcase shots to Cena's surgically repaired tricep. All the while the crowd chanted yes. Cena's arm gets hit into the ring post multiple times, then into the barricade, then into the steel steps, then his repaired arm gets hit by a chair while it's on steel steps, so that's pretty bad. He's been beaten up really bad before the match. He's already not 100%. Sandow then cashed in. Attitude adjustment just a few minutes later, it's over. Upon rewatch, This match was way worse than I remembered. A majority of the offense came from Damien Sandow. This was Super Cena's powers at their absolute worst. They even showed the Doctor during this match, and maybe a better decision would have been for the Doctor to call the match and just let Sandow win. After this, Sandow didn't really recover much momentum, though the guy did make do with what he was given. I think Sandow could have molded into something, but they didn't even give the guy a chance. Not as Mr. Money in the Bank, and definitely not as world champion. He was a chicken shit heel. He gave off big time Miz vibes to me, but it just didn't end up materializing for him. What we also shouldn't forget is what was going to happen a few months later, and that was the unification match between Orton and Cena. Having Sandow win and then playing hot potato with the title, I don't think that would have been the strongest decision. And again, this dude is a victim of circumstance. It just came at the hands of John Cena in an upcoming unification match. And that brings us to 2014 and Bray Wyatt. He burst onto the scene a year beforehand with Luke Harper and Eric Rowan. He had a cult leader character where he'd talk in riddles, manipulating minds, and the mind he was manipulating heading into WrestleMania 30 was John Cena. Wyatt had an extremely strong character, and in this story he was telling Cena to let out that internal monster, that he'd be the one to help him let it out. Well, at WrestleMania 30, he lost, and this one is debated a lot. I think a win for Wyatt really would have put him over the top. However, I personally disagree with the crowd that believes that this was a burial of Bray Wyatt. Could he have won more matches? Yes. But he had a 5-month rivalry with John Cena. This didn't end things for him, but it didn't do Wyatt any favors either. It felt like this could have been completely avoided. Bray was in that same vein as Tensai or Umaga, a monster who just ended up losing to John Cena without them having much of a plan after that. This could have been completely avoided. Bray did take a couple years to fully recover. Cena eventually lobbied to have him win the WWE title at the 2017 Elimination Chamber, having seen the error in his ways, or the booking's ways. Then he lost to him at WrestleMania 36. Quickly, the Rusev losses, I don't really think that was much of anything. They ran the whole anti-America versus America thing that literally has one ending. And that was basically all the offenses of Super Cena. Here we are all these years later, and fans are still talking about this run. The issue with it being, what if? What if he just changed things up even for a little bit? What would have happened? Where would we be now? How would John Cena had adapted should he had gone heel? Cena was actually set to turn heel. Believe it or not, it was Kmart of all things that prevented it from happening. Vince and Cena had both agreed to go through with it, but according to former WWE writer Kevin Eck, they couldn't because of the Kmart line. The dude was and is a cash cow for the WWE, so it's understandable why they didn't want to ruin that popularity. I will also say, and some people won't like this, WWE wanted him to be a superhero. That's literally what they wanted. The kids were asking their parents for t-shirts and action figures, and his involvement in the mainstream was crazy high. Why would they try to fix something that wasn't broken for them? They wanted money. They couldn't care less what we thought about it at the time. One other thing is, anything you do after wrestling John Cena will feel like a drop down the card because it's John Cena. That's how it works, because the spotlight you get with the guy. So now, looking back, I think the really egregious one, the one that rightfully so deserves the universal hatred and should continue to get the hatred, is the Nexus one. That was purely awful, and you cannot defend that. I don't care which way you spin it. Upon a rewatch, I didn't like the stuff with Ryder. I thought that was just really bad. The Sandow segment wasn't great either. Watch that one for yourself and let me know. I completely understand where fans who didn't like the guy's booking are coming from. Let's not act like this was a do no wrong character. The way he got booked was overdone like crazy, and as a ripple down caused many stories to be hampered. But looking back, Super Cena wasn't great for television programming, and the fact that they just kept sticking with it didn't make the greatest progression for anyone. However, like I said, Super Cena raked in money. Business-wise, he was fantastic and you can't debate that. But television content-wise, it was a repeat cycle. I get it, they wanted to cater to kids, it was working for them, it was raking in money. But why do you guys think it was so easy for people to get behind a Daniel Bryan or a CM Punk? Fans had been beaten into submission and they just wanted anyone else at the top because it was just that same guy, and it felt like it was a rehash of the same storylines essentially too. Cena's also put over guys like Kevin Owens, AJ Styles, Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns, CM Punk, Seth Rollins. But before that, man, it was a really rough cycle. Let me know what you guys think of this run. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you in the middle? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.